Lawyers of Reddit, what is the most effed up case that you have fought or seen? Client insisted on suing an employee who failed to show up to work, which caused a contract to be cancelled. The employee didn't show up to work because he died. Worst I've heard was a divorce case where both parties fought to not have the kids stay with them. It's so depressive to think about the children in that case. My uncle, lawyer, helped a relative with a traffic ticket. Relative was conspiracy nut and wanted to take it to court to reveal the lies. Uncle just paid the fine and told her she won. In a pro bono program, I was assigned to handle the request of an inmate to be released after serving 2/3 of his sentence. When I read his file, I discovered that he was convicted for kidnapping a woman, tying her to the right front wheel of his Jeep, and torturing her to death with some sort of homemade flamethrower. When I went to see the guy, he denied everything and told me he was appealing the verdict, which legally was not possible anymore. It was really weird sitting in a room with this guy, knowing what he was convicted of, and knowing that he'd been denying the conviction for almost 20 years. Needless to say, his request to be released early was denied. Edit: people have been asking questions about the sentence he got. He got life in prison, which makes you eligible for early release after 10 years, first offense, or 14 years, récidive, in Belgium. The death penalty was abolished in 1996. I'm here to provide comedic relief. My buddy is an attorney, and was working on a case against some company that was dumping pollution in a large, local body of water that had a direct opening to the ocean. He gets a letter from an incredibly concerned local dude. He wrote this long-ass letter, begging my buddy's team to do all they can to win the case against the polluting company for the sake of the mermaids that were living in that local body of water. He had seen them often, guys. He had been trying to befriend them for quite a while now, and was concerned for their well-being, and for the possibility that they would move out to the ocean to find a cleaner home, if the company kept dumping pollution into their area. I wish I could find that pic of part of the letter. In case you're as concerned as he was, fear not. My buddy's team won the case, and that company is no longer dumping their waste in the body of water. Not a lawyer, but was on jury duty once, and the defendant was accused of breaking into an old lady's mobile home, raping her for several days, then tying her up, and putting her in the trunk of her own car on the driveway, in 110 degrees heat, to kill her. She survived over a day in the trunk, when someone found her. Was he sent to life imprisonment? Yes. My subsequent understanding was that this was his third strike, so it was a mandatory life sentence. I got jury duty once. For context, I am a parent with young daughters. Guy was accused of raping an 11-year-old girl multiple times. I am not proud of myself, but after several days, I just told the judge that I didn't think I could be impartial, and asked if I could be reassigned to literally any other crime or civil matter. I was excused. Also, when I came home and found out that the sitter hadn't locked the back door, I kinda freaked out and told her to keep all doors locked and her cell charged to call 911, also to start carrying pepper spray. That whole incident broke me for a while. Literally, any other matter would have been fine for me. Not that. A sociopath in a psych ward, making suicide pacts with vulnerable people, and never following through. Charged with murder, determined he was too out of his mind to be accountable. Gonna be in an asylum for the next 2 decades, unless something major changes within the case. I am not a lawyer, I work for one. We represented a family who tried to ruin a teenage boy's life. They fabricated police reports, falsely claimed he stole expensive electronics from them, and took their claims to the very uninterested school the boy attended. When cops tried to investigate, the family evaded the investigator, and lied to him. Why do all this? The family's son was crushing on a girl they were hosting in their home. She chose to date the boy in question over the son. All 3 kids were classmates. The boy got a hefty settlement from the family. This case was outside our typical areas of practice, but they came from a friend of the attorney. Not my case, but I was sat in chambers, waiting to be heard, when it came before the judge. A reasonably successful businessman had died, leaving a will, in which he left all his business assets to his wife, on the condition that she destroy everything. Inventory, parts, records, office equipment, all of it. If she refused, everything was to be given to the Hemlock Society, an organization in the States somewhere, that advocates for the assisted suicide. Shortly after making the will, he committed suicide, having arranged for his death to be video recorded, and the recording to be emailed to his wife and kids automatically. The lawyer didn't say what the method of suicide was, but did say that it was traumatic for all who received the video. Unsurprisingly, the lawyer saw it and received a consent order to amend the will to delete the destruction condition. He had the agreement of the Hemlock Society, which wanted nothing to do with a donation under those conditions. A woman was alone with her baby after her husband got deployed. This was not long after the baby was born. Then the baby passed away, and the body had some strange bruising. The mother insisted the baby crawled out of her sight and fell down the stairs. The case ultimately got reassigned from our office, and the mother was pissed. She told the primary lawyer on the case that she had indeed killed the baby. She basically bragged about it, and she had zero remorse at all. Seeing the infant's autopsy photos was absolutely horrific. Took a pro bono divorce case. The husband tried to attack me in the parking lot, claiming I was screwing his wife. He said, "No lawyer works for free, so she must be screwing me." Not a lawyer. But I got my ex-husband to sign an agreement to pay back $10,000 worth of damages and back bills, ran up in my name. When we separated, I went back to live with Mom. He destroyed our marital home when him and his then-girlfriend were in fights. When I took the home back over, got better job, I saw that my home was destroyed, and several months' mortgage wasn't paid, after he agreed to it. Court rolls around, and I have the most obnoxious judge I've ever seen. My first sign was she said, "It's the day before New Year's Eve, I'm visiting friends tonight, so, let's make this quick," and begins to dance in her chair, laughing. She literally didn't look at the signed agreement, and dismissed the case in a matter of minutes. I was completely dumbfounded. My agreement was drawn up by a lawyer, and she didn't even bother to ask me to hand it over to her. After we were dismissed, my ex-husband remarks, "That's good, 'cause today is my birthday," which oddly it was. She started joking with him on the way out. Not only did my mouth drop, but more than one person came up to me and their strangers, one lawyer, and said, this was the worst display of behavior they ever seen by a judge. She didn't let me, or my husband, speak. I was a divorced single parent with $10,000 in back bills, and a home destroyed, my children's bedroom furniture, their toys were busted up. I waited months to get to this case. I had everything prepared. I sought a lawyer with what little money I had, and felt entirely cheated. Case told to me by another lawyer, on one of my cases. Two guys decided to give a marijuana-laced brownie to their coworker, without telling him it is marijuana in it. Right before he started his shift as a crane operator. It went predictably badly, resulted in an accident, and even their union agreed the guys should be fired. Represented a painter getting sued on a construction defect job. The painter was hired to paint building 2 and 3. He showed up for work, performed the work, and on his way home, got into a terrible car accident, leaving him paralyzed from the neck down. He was sued, several years later, for water intrusion defects, related to buildings 7 to 9, which he didn't work on. Felt terrible for the guy. I got sued for dumping concrete in a driveway drain on a new construction. We don't even pour concrete. Turns out, after the housing crash, we were the only company that didn't go bankrupt. The guy didn't win. Once they found out who my attorney was, they dropped it. Not my case, but I was at the Frank Crowley Courthouse in Dallas for work, and had free time to watch some of the trial against Chris Dunch, aka Dr. Death. I watched 2 of his victims come into court in wheelchairs, and a nurse testify about how he severed this patient's spinal cord, and basically walked out like he didn't care. The victims in wheelchairs were supposed to undergo an hour-long procedure, go home for recovery, but instead, woke up in the hospital paralyzed. Really effed up case, and a tragedy that he was allowed to keep bouncing around to different hospitals without repercussions. Anyways, I haven't seen the miniseries yet, but my friend has, and she was like, "I'm sure they dramatized it, you know Hollywood." I honestly don't think you can dramatize that, at least, based on the testimony I saw. Sometimes the crime is so stupid and dangerous that it is its own punishment. Here's a story I wrote 2 years ago about some bank robbers who were saved by the police. I was just coming on board with the DA's office, and this is the first case that landed in my lap. For me at least, it was an education in just how far afield of sanity one can fly on cocaine. In 1983, I was the deputy DA for 2.5 counties in a 6-county judicial district in the rural West. I had an office that included only me and a secretary and a storefront in one of the county seats. The town was also a ski town. So, yeah, some drugs. My first time in court was a pre-trial hearing for some bank robbers. They weren't exactly professionals. They were, in fact, restaurateurs who had a typical ski town experience. They opened up a nifty restaurant, which was immediately successful. They worked like dogs, seldom saw their families, built the business into a money-making machine. And when they finally had it all up and running smoothly, they decided to celebrate some. At first, there was plenty of money for coke. Work, 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 party, 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 ski, ski, ski. Seemed like it would last forever. It didn't. Had to cut back on the restaurant, because money for coke had a higher priority. Finally, they arrived at a place where none of the pending bills could be paid, if more coke was to be purchased. This was unacceptable. So, they decided to rob a bank. The bank in question had been previously, in the last century, stuck up by Butch Cassidy and the Hole-in-the-Wall gang, so, maybe, that was the inspiration. The bank was proud of that robbery. It was a local bank, with a big vault, and a 2-ton roundish safe on rollers, that they kept in the lobby, because it was pretty neat. Our restaurateurs didn't want to do something so dangerous, as barge into the bank, and steal money face to face. Instead, they rented the office next door to the bank. They were going to tunnel in. Which they did. Got all the way under the foundation of their building, under the foundation of the bank, and finally tunneled right under the vault. People in the bank reported funny noises. Eventually, the local marshals began sniffing around. Good thing, too. Our boys had reached the floor of the vault, and were appalled to find rebar in the concrete. What to do? Rebar cutting torch. That's the ticket. Visualize this, I heard it first at that court hearing. They had tunneled down under 2 building foundations, and then up under the vault. No ventilation. Now if they had crawled under there and lit that torch, the oxygen in their little sub-vault chamber would have been used up in no time flat. The trouble was, that lack of oxygen does not provoke any reaction in humans. You begin to gasp for breath when the CO2 content in your body becomes too high. That requires physical effort, and takes some time. Time they didn't have. By the time they realized they were out of oxygen, they would be asphyxiating, not enough energy to crawl back out of that tunnel. Dead meat. It was worse than that. Suppose they had ventilated, and the cops were slower on the uptake. What then? Here's what. Remember the 2-ton safe on wheels? What the robbers didn't know was that every night at closing, they rolled that safe into the vault. So, had they gotten through the rebar, it was just a matter of time before a 2-ton safe came crashing down on them, like some bad outtake featuring the hapless coyote in a Roadrunner Looney Tune. The cops got to them, just in time. That's actually what one of them said to the judge at my hearing. They were so grateful. They had been in the county slammer for maybe 3 months, so, they had time to dry out. They thanked everyone who busted them. They threw themselves on the mercy of the court. And this is the part that stuck with me. They made a very convincing case, that they did not even recognize those 2 coked-out bandits as themselves. To them, it seemed like alien entities had taken over their bodies. The coke has a mind of its own. The more I dealt with coke, and meth, too, the more likely, that unlikely excuse seemed. I'm not a doctor, but my experience is, that the drugs we sell, legally and illegally, are not much different than the zombie drugs that drive a rabid rabbit to attack a fox. The drugs have an agenda all their own. So, yeah, coke is fun. It's like putting rabies up your nose. Good for the rabies, I guess. Not for anyone else. As for the robbers? What can I tell you? It was a ski town. After the defendants, advised and assisted by their excellent lawyers, had made an exquisite swan dive onto the mercy of the court, thence came a parade of pillars of the community to testify, as to what civic heroes they had been, before their little indiscretion. Even the president of the bank, for Christ's sakes. The mitigation was epic and dramatic. They were led astray. It was all an aberration, no one was hurt, they were the perps, but they were the only victims, too. They, and their stellar families, who are right here supporting them still, in spite of everything. We are all white people here. Let us help our straying brothers. Jail will not do them, or their families, any good. I mean, it could have happened to any one of us. Gotta admit, that last point was valid. Ski town. On a powder day, you can almost breathe the privilege. They got time served, perpetual probation, and they had to compensate the bank. The judge skied, too. My first trial case was about a 26-year-old, who was arrested for possession of drug paraphernalia, but after spending 2 weeks in jail, they rushed her to the hospital where she died. Turns out, she had a heart valve infection, and told them about it day one. But they wrote her off as a druggie, and that she was just faking her symptoms. She had 2 kids. And we lost the case, because the defense made the entire case about her drug use, and argued that she did it to herself. Guy made a porno starring himself and his own 8-year-old daughter. Confessed everything in a Mirandized interview. Screamed at me, because the best deal I could get him was out by his 70s. I hope he dies before his release date. Not a lawyer, but used to work in a law firm. One attorney told me about a case he was trying, where the defendant was up for animal abuse charges. What did he do? Well, he and his wife were going through a nasty divorce, and he had moved out and started living with a friend. One weekend, he knew his wife and kids were away, so he got hammered and decided to go F up the house. This dude totally trashed it. But the worst part, he took his kid's new kitten and placed it in the microwave and turned it on. He left it there for them to find. Effing disgusting psycho. This legit made me angry and sad. A family member of one of my friends recently had her dog shot for no reason. The dog, which is not violent, was in her secured backyard. She went down the street to a local shop quickly, gone maybe 20 minutes. Comes home, to another neighbor freaking out, and runs to her to tell her what happened. Apparently, her whole neighbor was getting drunk in his backyard, and just decided he wanted to shoot the dog over the fence. The other neighbor that ran to her had witnessed it. They got the dog to the vet, but they could not save him. A whole who shot the dog ended up pleading guilty, no prison, but has got community service, and can no longer own firearms. Weak as hell outcome, if you ask me. Dependency case, where a single father dipped his toddler in boiling water, because he was crying about some silly toddler thing. Kid was severely burned over his whole body. They were trying to reunify them. This is horrible, but unfortunately, it's not uncommon. The burn pattern of being dipped in hot boiling water is taught to mandatory reporters, because it happens with some frequency. It's hard to understand how it happens in a fit of rage, because water takes time to heat and boil. It has to be somewhat premeditated. Truly horrific. It really is. The guy in this case claimed he was making dinner, so there was water boiling already, and it happened in the heat of the moment. I thought that was BS. The pot was way larger than necessary to make a small meal. Plus, this guy was not the sort to prepare home-cooked spaghetti. He was more of a slap some peanut butter on stale bread, if he remembers to feed his son, type of guy. It's chilling to think how he likely sat there for 20 minutes, waiting for this water to boil. Not a lawyer. I once had a 65-year-old guy try to sue me when I was 12 years old, because I set up his modem while he was in town. Then he moved and continued to use the internet. He racked up an $800 long-distance bill and tried to sue me, a 12-year-old, over it. He continued to harass me for months, leaving messages on my answering machine, and ended up singing, "Green Acres is the place to be," and yelling, "I'm going to get you." We saved all of it, in case he actually went through with the lawsuit. Never made it to court. Seriously, this kinda breaks the entire construct, but I thought I'd share. Watched a trial. Defendant was living with his girlfriend and her 14-year-old son. He thought she was cheating on him. He stabbed her 51 times. The stabbing spilled out into the hallway of the apartment building, and was caught on surveillance. I have never seen so much blood in my life, but that wasn't the worst part. Her son was in the hallway, watching this happen. He wanted to help his mother. He was trying to pull her away from the boyfriend, but didn't want to get himself stabbed. You can see the doubt and hesitation about getting involved in his body language. From time to time, I think about how scared and helpless that kid must have felt. Watching someone kill your mother, but you're unable to do anything to stop it. Terrible. The summer after my first year of law school, I interned at the public defender's office. I went to meet a new client, who was accused of rape. Within 20 seconds of meeting the man, he told he was not guilty, and had proof. His proof was, I tried to rape her, but was too high on meth to get an erection. Needless to say, we didn't go with that defense, and my internship ended before we went to trial. I'm here for a bit of a comedic break from all of the heavy stuff. Also, I did submit this to Not Always Right when it began, but I never provided the ending. I am not a lawyer, but I work at a law office. A regular part of my job is to screen potential new clients, PNC, to help our attorneys decide if they have a case or not. Is the case worth taking? Is the client reliable if we take the case to litigation, etc., etc.? I still remember this clearly, despite it being over a year ago. One Monday morning in January 2020, with me fresh in the office, with a hangover, and feeling like death warmed over, this flashed on my screen from our online contact form. PNC requests a callback regarding car accident, and her insurance company is now refusing to cover the cost of a breast enlargement that her doctor stated was to help her balance, after car accident, cause spinal issues. Well, because I am an absolute sucker for punishment, i.e., despite all common sense, and several women telling my boss to not touch this flaming shit pile, I end up following up with this PNC. So, she comes into the office, and the story unfolds. It starts with the obvious. She's this tall, no longer willowy recovering trophy wife, who can't quite lose the 10 pounds of baby weight, from being her plastic surgeon husband's source of the perquisite junior and princess. Her husband is this Danny DeVito stunt double, and talks like molasses, while smelling like rum and coke. I didn't like him, because he couldn't stop eyeing me up, and made several comments about coming to him when I lost weight, so he could do my skin surgery. She's in an auto accident in her hubby's Porsche Cayenne. Beautiful car, honestly. Well, at the end of the case, after the property damage is paid out, and she got most of the medical care paid for, they, Trophy and doctor, make a complaint. It seems fairly simple at first. The auto insurance didn't pay a medical bill. So, we send the legal version of, a WTF, dude? You said you were gonna pay this out, letter, because my employer thinks, ooh, a few easy billable hours? This soon after Christmas? Santa, baby, I've been an awful good boy, the auto insurance company sends back, LOL, you're smoking that good shit, brah. We ain't paying for this. Talk to your client about what this bill is for, and who's getting paid. So, we look at the bill. It's from her husband. For her breast enhancement. Which her husband said was medically necessary, because the enlarged breasts balanced her spine, so she had less back pain. Needless to say, we dropped trophy wife and Dr. DeVito post haste. I told him not to take this case. I really did. Not me, but my aunt was a lawyer, and she worked on the BTK case. I only learned about it once I was an adult, and when she mentioned it, she seemed really far off mentally. I've never looked the case up personally, but I know what the BTK stood for. I can't imagine having to see the evidence in that case, and be in the same room as the man filing charges against a John Doe, because client was arrested for a crime he did not commit, and spent a year and $40,000 defending himself in a prior criminal case. Man ended up proving, in court, that the man he was filing against stole his identity to commit crimes. Man also brought the investigator of the original case as a witness, solely to force him to lie on the stand. Nothing happened to the investigator, other than him embarrassing himself. Man won, and sued for 3 times the damages. I'm not a lawyer, but my dad used to be a reporter for court cases. I hope this is allowed. He covered a case where 3 guys were sitting around a campfire in the suburbs. 2 got into an argument and it got heated. One ended up killing the other, cut off his head, and propped the head on top of a tree trunk, and continued taunting the head. It was a papaya tree, don't know why. I remember that part of the story most clearly. The 3rd guy watched the whole thing, and did nothing. Not really effed up, but amusing. My dad won a case against Baskin-Robbins 30 years ago, because his client chipped her tooth on a pistachio shell while eating pistachio ice cream. No warning label. I don't remember the settlement amount, but it was hefty. I'm a medic, not a lawyer, but have had to testify a few times. One time, a guy did something stupid enough, it ended up on national news for a minute. He was offered a plea deal that would have kept him out of jail, and wasn't bad at all. He pleaded not guilty. What he did was on video. Like, dude, it was on effing Comedy Central. I think you did it. Not a lawyer, but I was reporting a crime to the police, and the detective in charge told me his station had just solved a huge drug bust. The drug dealer was speeding in his van with millions of dollars worth of drugs inside, when he lost control of his vehicle coming around a corner, and crashed into a bunch of police cars parked outside the front of the station. Needless to say, the police were very happy, and labeled it the easiest drug bust ever.